What you're about to hear is a love story. Probably not what you're expecting from a career change podcast, but when you start listening to this interview, you'll know exactly what I mean. You're about to hear the story of Jim and Natasha. Now, before their big career moves, Jim worked as General Counsel to huge companies such as Ryanair and Etihad and Uber. And Natasha was co-founder of Wizz Air and was also their former head of corporate communications and public affairs. The interview is a little bit different because I get to grill Jim and Natasha both at the same time. So it's a bit longer than normal because you're getting two absolutely amazing stories for the price of one. I really love chatting to them both, and I really hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. So make yourselves comfortable, strap yourselves in, and get ready for takeoff.
Welcome to Your Big Career Move, where your host, Yeshim Nicholson, chats to people about their big career moves, uncovers their motivations, their fears, their successes, and everything in between. Be inspired by their stories, and if you're thinking of making your own big career move, head over to yescareercoaching.com. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Hi, I'm Yeshim Nicholson, and welcome back to another episode of Your Big Career Move. Now, if you've watched some of my interviews to date, you'll know that I generally speak to people on a one-to-one basis. So today is going to be slightly different. I'm really grateful that you've taken the time, both of you, to speak to me today. I feel like I should be bowing down to you guys a little bit. Your career is just, it's just incredible. I think you've both achieved some remarkable thing, not least what you're doing now, which we're going to delve into. But actually, before we start talking about what you're doing now, can we start with a little snapshot of what each of you were doing before you made your big career change? Jim, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure, Yashim, and thank you so much for having us on. So where to start? People perceive you by what you do, what your title is. And so by all accounts, I was at the pinnacle of my career. I had started out from lowly beginnings, grew up on a farm in Ireland. So to have gone to law school and to become a lawyer and then eventually work for some of the biggest companies in the world, I would never have anticipated it. And so after law school, I went to Brussels and was working for a corporate law firm and doing some major transactions. By that stage, I was already married. We had one child. And already, it was quite apparent that life was going to be very tough. But moved on to Ryanair, which was kind of jumping from one frying pan to another. And I was the first lawyer in Ryanair. And I was also the company secretary. So it was very fast paced. Probably most people know of Ryanair and how hard charging things are. I think it was described at one stage as the mini me of Michael O'Leary, which I'm not sure whether that's a compliment or not, but certainly shows, how you can fit into a role and really, run with it. I then moved on to Etihad Airways, was again General Counsel of Etihad Airways. Many of the same challenges as with Ryanair, heavily regulated industry, a lot of stress and pressure there. By that stage, things were already kind of going off the rails in terms of my own health and well-being. And then, you tend to try and change it up to solve what your problems are, but it never seems to work. And I started with Uber. And that's really where things kind of went off the rails completely. I was general counsel for Uber EMEA. So that was kind of the pinnacle of the legal career, the corporate career. But the interesting thing is that nobody ever kind of knew what was going on in the background. So you tend to portray this steadfast, I'm in charge attitude, but it's always interesting what's going on in the background.
Yeah, I'm so going to peel back the layers of that in a minute. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. Thank you. And your lovely wife, Natasha, would you like to give us your background?
Yes. thank you for having us, Yashim. It's a real pleasure. And just like Jim, I had a humble beginnings. I grew up in an international company. See, that's
it's ingrained.
Family mostly in Central and Eastern Europe. And then, my father worked in the airline industry, and it was just by accident that when I was looking for an internship after college, I bumped into his boss, and basically he offered me an internship. So my involvement in the airline industry was accidental in this sense, but also kind of, you look at it like I stepped into my dad's shoes in a way. And then, one thing after another, I worked for the national airline of Hungary, which is non-existent anymore. And then as things happened, we got a new CEO who then got a group of people together, and we went on and founded Wizz Air, which is one of Ryanair's competitors. This is how Jim and I met.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it meant, being a member of a startup team. My whole life was Wizz Air, basically. I was so in love with what I was doing. Success became absolutely addictive, and it was just, we were doing the right thing in the right moment. It was a window of opportunity, an amazing team, back then, and so it just caught me in, and I was identifying myself with who I was at Wizz Air. So when I met Jim a few years later, there was just this moment, again, a window of opportunity for me. I was like, right, so what am I going to do with my life? I'm going to be a corporate executive all of my life, or I want to explore other things like love, for example. And I'm saying it like this, but it wasn't really a question. So when we got together with Jim, I knew that I needed to make a jump. So it meant that I had to leave my corporate career. At that stage, I have been not only the co-founder, but the head of corporate communications, public affairs, and I went and established Wizz Air Ukraine. So I worked a year in Ukraine as the general manager of Wizz Air Ukraine, which was absolutely amazing. Probably the best year of my airline career in terms of, all the excitement that was going on. So I left. I don't think I had any other choice. And I believe in the fact when they say that things happen to you and they are meant to be, in a way. So Jim our love put me in a very different situation. So I moved to the Middle East, where Jim was the General Counsel of Etihad. And so that's why my career change basically began, because I would have never thought of changing career without the physical displacement, or what's the right word? If I wouldn't have to move, I don't think I would be looking for something.
And did you move out to the Middle East with a job?
No.
Did you have a job to go to, or you literally quit your job? Are you basically saying you quit your job for love?
I did. It was the case. It was absolutely the case. It was just, there was no other option in our minds back then. But I guess we're going to talk about this. This was probably one of the hardest periods of my life, the following 2-3 years, to find myself, basically.
Well, it's such a big change, isn't it? Because not only have you given up this amazing career that, in your words, defined you and became so much part of your identity. So you're leaving that, you're moving to a brand new country, which has a very different culture. It's not moving from one country that's quite similar to its neighbor. This is very vastly different cultures where women are treated in different ways, I guess, and all of that sort of stuff. And you're in a new relationship. What else did you want to throw at this?
Buying your house.
And you know what? Like, I have to be very honest. When I moved to the Middle East, to Abu Dhabi, I lived the life of luxury. We had a house, we had a pool boy, we had a gardener. Jim bought me a new car. So on the surface, I was given a dream of life. Now, when we change, I think, from one be it career to career or one life situation to another, I think there is a time of adjustment, and a lot of people don't realize it, how difficult it is, especially if you're thinking, oh, I'm coming to live with the love of my life, but I left behind such an important part of me. And, I used to be called in the middle of the night because, one of our flights was 40 minutes late. Oh my God, now people don't even bat an eye at this, but back then it was like, oh, this is crisis, or like, I'm of course making fun of it, but really I was also the face of the company. I was somebody, important. And suddenly I'm moving to the Middle East, an unknown territory for me. I'm somebody's somebody, so I'm just a sidekick of the man here. So that was a difficult one, but that, I think, it was the best thing that could have happened to me in that situation, because everything that unfolded from there, really reflecting back, really justified that change. And I feel so lucky and so grateful for life, to Jim, that the love had that power of basic, because I don't know what I would be right now. I would definitely not be here, not be doing this, and maybe who knows, there are a number of scenarios in my head, but it was absolutely the right decision. It was super hard, but it was.
So I'm so curious, because if you're going from a job where you're essentially on 24/7 and you're getting calls in the middle of the night, and that's going to start to, I guess, create something in your body, right? Where you're just your stress levels, whether you're conscious of it or not, are just constantly high. To then going to a life where you have people doing nice things for you, and you're living this life of luxury where it sounds like you didn't have to worry about too much. What happens there? What happens in that transition period?
For me, it felt like I was in a black hole. Jim was away all the time. I mean, with my job, it was 24/7, a lot of traveling. And you were never home. And when you were home, I was alone and I was lonely, and I was not finding satisfaction in anything. I didn't know how to live my life as a wife of leisure, or like, I just didn't understand this, like the coffee mornings, yoga classes. I got into the yoga classes later on, but not the coffee mornings, not the shopping afternoons. Nothing really appealed to me because they were not of the same significance as my previous career. So we went through very, very rough times as a couple and as a person. Like, I felt I don't know myself anymore. I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do. So it started a period of really deep self-reflection and rediscovery of myself. So as things are in this situation, you meet people who you need to meet in this situation, who help you find the right skills, like tools. Like I learned some energy healing. I discovered friendships that were on a different level, and I have some people who really helped me. And I think also I really believe in as I said, things happen because they're meant to be. Like our relationship with Jim is not, it's not all nice and rosy, but I think we have such a deep understanding of what the other needs, but it didn't happen from day one. We had to work through, and I'm very grateful that we did work through. So Jim helped me, although he was stressed, divorced by that time with 4 kids. So there was the family stress, the work stress, and I was with my, searching of who I am and what I'm supposed to do. So besides that kind of emotional change that I was going through, I was, of course, looking for something to do. I was looking for a job, and oh my God, Yashim, if the interviews that I went through, and people just don't understand who you are if you don't have a very classic resume. If you don't have, like, I started here and I got here, and if they cannot draw the line, they just don't know what to do with you. So,
and you don't fit into a particular box.
No. So, and I did try. Oh my God, I did try because I really wanted. I felt like I was not contributing to the society, to a relationship. So, but I went back to school. I studied positive leadership and strategy in Madrid, which was amazing. I learned a lot about myself. I started yoga. I started, the all paths that basically led to where I am today, and led to the other difficulty was, just to jump back on this, is that, you come from, like, what is the next move for somebody who's a co-founder of a super successful airline?
Yeah.
And I was
There's
like,
no obvious, okay, Natasha,
like,
the next step is this.
Next step, what? A PR manager in an airline, or like even if what do you do from there? So I needed to let go of this, I don't know of what it was, but let go of something, maybe of Wizz Air in a way, that I was such and such as a Wizz Air person, and now I'm in this hole. But I think that was such an important learning. And I think what we're doing together finally with Jim now, I wouldn't even put it at the same level. It's much more, it's that next move. It's that next that I think a lot of us are dreaming of, when you do something not only meaningful for you, but
helping others.
Generally, it's a whole story. It's the complete story for me.
It's a high. So before we go there, there's always two sides to a story. So I'm dying to hear what your side is, Jim. What's going on for you while you've got this wonderful, beautiful lady that comes to move to be with you on the other side of the world? What's going on for you?
Yeah, I mean, as Natasha said, it was very difficult because, we have this amazing love, and it was tough with my situation with my previous wife and my 4 kids. But I think, ironically, I had gotten to such a bad point in terms of my own mental and physical well-being that Natasha was kind of my forcing my kind of decision to make a change, and it was incredibly messy, and a lot of guilt, and added stress from how things happened. But I think, these are the kinds of events in your life that lead to that change that needs to happen.
Yeah, either you decide to take to get in charge,
or life will intervene.
Exactly.
And so that was where I was at, kind of between the transition from Ryanair to Etihad. And again, it was this looked like a logical move from a career point of view. Sure. It was, I was this successful lawyer, General Counsel, company secretary of Ryanair, well known in the industry, moving to a different segment of the industry. I mean, Etihad Airways is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of luxury. No denigration to Ryanair, but it looked like, wow, this is an interesting move. It looks like a step up, Middle Eastern carrier. But it masked the fact that my life was a mess. My relationship with my wife and kids was in tatters. My kids used to say when we'd be on holidays, Dad, you're always on the telephone. I mean, how sad is that? That's your kid's impression of you. And so, thinking, okay, I'm going to make a change, and a change in companies, a change in level, etc., should help. It doesn't. Until you change the problem, you're going to carry it with you to the next level. And so I think that's where, it was such an explosion in my life. But ironically, learning to pick up the pieces and put them into a different way, that's really what has led us to where we are now.
And I think also to add to that, I think we spend a lot of time talking about things that, for you, after you left your previous relationship, there was a different kind of conversations, and that also that triggered a lot of things, but it also helped you to see things from different perspective. And same things for me. It was new, the relationship was new, and I think the intensity of the relationship really helped us to go really deep, but then come to the level where we could take the next step from already.
Yeah, and I think despite how kind of stressed and preoccupied I was, I think I was always trying to be there for Natasha and be a support, but not doing things for her.
Yeah.
It was like, look, I can't solve this problem for you. I can be here for you, but I can't solve it for you. And so I think that was a difficult message for you.
Yeah.
And you struggled a lot in those years, but I think that has led you to a situation where it's like, wow, I actually can do this for myself. I can make these changes and not have somebody telling me this is where you need to go, this is what you need to do.
I think that was one of my biggest learning, is that in the corporate world, you had a structure, you had a system, you had processes, and usually, I had a very driven CEO who was, and still probably is, a control freak in a lot of ways. You're at a certain level, you get to do your things, but you're still in that box, you are in a corporate. And here, Jim, I think he taught me during these times is that, I think you even said something along the line that you told me that I have to notice that I have my own wings, and then I just need to fly, and you'll be there with me, but you won't be telling me if it's right or wrong. And I think from career change perspective, how we do things now, I feel much more liberated. I feel like I have my things, you have your things, and we're doing it together. You're not my boss, I'm not your boss. And I think when you become an entrepreneur, I think that's shift from a corporate kind of way of things to being an entrepreneur. It's a very different mindset,
Yeah, definitely. That's one of my questions for you that I'm keeping up my sleeve that I want to go back to at some point during our conversation. Just to go back to you, Jim, to this scenario where you're in the Middle East, Natasha's just moved out. What was it that finally, because did you quit your job? You didn't quit your job while you were in the Middle East. You still had another career move up your sleeve, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was at Etihad for 7 years. And then, it was enough at that stage. And we had talked about moving back to Europe. I was commuting every month back to see my boys in Ireland. And even on a luxury airline, you don't get much sleep. And I was flying overnight to get there and overnight on the way back. So physically and mentally,
after 7 years,
I was completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And so when the Uber opportunity came along, it was a desperate jump in the end. And I kind of had a sense that it wasn't the right move. But again, you look for these things. You're not thinking rationally when you're in that situation. And, I have no regrets. I think that the time that I spent there really kind of clearly demonstrated that the corporate world was not the place for me. I had been there, done that, bought several T-shirts. And so that was the transition to Uber. And I think by that stage, my body had been keeping such a score over the years, even since law school days, working during law school, and then these highly stressful jobs, that it was time to say stop. And if I wasn't going to stop, then my body was going to stop.
Which it did.
And it did. I had, by all accounts, a breakdown while I was with Uber. And that kind of forces your hand. And at this stage, our first son, my fifth son, Daniel, was born. And I just thought to myself, I want to be there for my boys. I want to be there for my grandkids. And I want to be there for Natasha. And at this stage, there was a question mark how long, in terms of my health, that was going to be the case. I was having some heart problems. And that was really what forced the situation. I had turned 50. And I said to myself, I actually want to live another 50 years. And I'm not going to do that the way I'm doing things now. And that was really the kind of trigger.
For the real.
That was my trigger for finally starting to deal with my health.
This sounds like possibly a stupid question, but I'm curious to know, because I think a lot of people do experience health issues when they're in intensely stressful situations for prolonged periods of time. I think we're all okay dealing with them, a short bursts of stress. But I think when it's that continuous stress that we experience, we do start to have the heart palpitations and the this and the that, we do, our body starts to tell us. At what point did you realize that the physical ailments that you were experiencing were related to stress that was being caused through work?
I think I always had the suspicion that was the case. We certainly hadn't delved deep into the science at that stage. my problem was that I was constantly going to doctors with these low-level kind of ailments, but mostly lack of energy. I always felt like I was living a half life, like I was struggling through the day and just, trying to keep on top of things. And I was going to doctors and coming out with a clean bill of health. Maybe your cholesterol is a little bit high, might want to lose a few pounds, but everything is fine. And so it's like, well, no, it's not fine. Like, I just don't feel like I'm living up to my potential from a health point of view. So I think there's, that was the frustration for me, is that I'm trying to do something and, you run for a while, maybe that'll help. You go on a diet to eliminate all these foods. We would go on spa vacations. It's these little bits and pieces trying to manage the stress and your health. Nothing seems to work. I mean, I literally broke down in a couple of meetings with my boss from the US, and it scared the hell out of me that I literally couldn't function. I couldn't speak in some high level meetings, and yeah, it's a big wake up call.
Yeah, I think that's when you came home and you said, right, this was so scary that you couldn't talk. I remember that Jim was like so shocked at what his body was communicating by, being in a meeting, doing things that he would do like 1,000 times or millions of times before, and he couldn't speak. And he was just like in this, I think for you, that's what it took.
Yeah.
That very shocking experience. For others, it's a heart attack or a cancer diagnosis, or, like a complete shutdown, or, for you, it was that moment of, oh my God, I cannot speak at the meeting. And I think that's when you started to
That was the wake-up call.
That was the wake-up call. Yeah, it's not that it's
it was a clear message.
Yeah.
You need to change.
And we talked very briefly before I hit record about the fact that we're all on a mission to help people realize that they don't have to feel rubbish. They don't have to feel drained of energy. They can feel good. And this is why I'm so excited to talk to you guys, because I think if you can catch people before they get to the point where they do have the heart attack, or,
Correct.
God forbid, some other awful thing happens to them. I guess it would just be interesting to know what happened. So you had a couple of meetings where you're like, this is out of control. I can't perform in the way that I used to. So what happened? Did you just went and quit? How does that work?
So pretty much I quit. I told my boss that I was having some health issues, and like I didn't make a big deal out of, a lot of people, when they get to that stage, they try to sue the company, all this kind of stuff. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself, and that was my realization at the time, was that this is my responsibility. I need to take care of it for my wife and my kids, myself. And so that started a journey for me, and I think you were in a similar situation, which really helped, that both of us started to try and figure out what we need to do to rediscover our own health. And it's, it can be difficult because there's so much information out there, often conflicting. And so it took us a long time to really figure out what worked for us. And that was kind of at a certain stage, this aha moment that, wow, it's not that difficult when you realize that there are certain things that as humans, we evolved in a certain way. The problem is that we're so far away from our natural rhythms that's what's causing the vast majority of problems with mental and physical health.
Yeah.
And so if you understand that, then it becomes a lot easier to start making those changes, because it makes perfect sense. Like the importance of sleep. In the corporate world, it's seen as an efficiency. You need to limit your sleep. We must maximize the time that we're awake. And it's complete insanity, because we now know through the science, if you're not getting sufficient sleep, you're massively suboptimal in terms of your performance. And it's driving a lot of the issues with stress. So once you understand the importance of it, then you say, well, this is actually a performance enhancer if I'm getting good quality and quantity of sleep. Okay. And so we've really tried to show the link between health and performance, because folks like us 15 years ago in our career, where you're starting to hit that wall and you're saying, I don't know if I can do this for the next 15, 20 years. what they're still concerned about is performance. And so if you can link health with that performance, it's kind of an added incentive.
So, but the interesting thing is this. So it started off with Jim, trying to live another 50 years in good health. For him, for me, it was, I gave birth, I was always 44. I was massively overweight. I put on like 40 kilos with my IVF process before and the pregnancy. I was depressed, all the things compounded. And so what we were trying to do is Jim was trying to build his next 50 years. And I was trying to lose weight and feel my body as my own again after birth, breastfeeding and all this kind of stuff. And so we were kind of, on a parallel tracks, and then suddenly we saw, like what he's doing, what she's doing, and of course we talked a lot about it. And then this link for performance, it came like I think a year or a year and a half into our journey. We're like, hey, we're actually not
feel better, right?
Not only feeling better. Jim, I don't know if you've seen his pictures in the book, but they're absolutely phenomenal. Like he went from being, I used to lovingly call him Mr. Bellyman. He's got this nice belly to this very strong and super strong and really well built person that I'm very proud of. Like he was noticing that he's 50, but he looks much better than the majority of 25-year-olds, and he's much stronger. And at work, where we are studying a lot and doing stuff, not necessarily, in a corporate context, but I was noticing that my brain is sharper. I don't have brain fog anymore. I'm much focused. I like catch things on the fly, and we're like, wow, isn't this valuable? Can we do something with this to help? And of course, we're talking to friends and people were like, what are you guys doing? What's happening? Like, what's this buzz? How are you functioning at this level? How do you look so good at that?
What's this magic pill you're taking?
What magic pill? Exactly. So we said, well, actually, this is what it is. And then we started for fun. We started doing little like challenges for our friends and family and, let's try this. And then I figured, actually, there's more in that than just, helping a small group of friends. So this is how we came to where we are today with our company, Wellness Story. And this is what the book is about, really, to put that out.
Yeah, this seems like the perfect opportunity for you to give your book a little plug. You have a copy to hand, ready for takeoff. And obviously the reference to the aviation background that you both come from. And actually, I have to say one thing that really made me chuckle is right at the beginning of your book, you talk about the fact that you had this strategy meeting to discuss where your careers were going to go. I love that. Do you want to talk about that? What happened during your strategy meeting?
We're using everything, because for us with Jim, we like to throw ideas out, and especially I think a lot of your guests would say that, COVID, as bad as it was a massive accelerator for all, a lot of good changes. And, for us, we stayed at home. I mean, not that I was going anywhere before, but Jim sometimes went to meetings and places. But so we were at home and we were talking more and we had a lot of ideas. But the problem with the ideas is that, unless you write them down or unless you structure them, they're just out there and they're fun to talk about. We forget about it. So we said, right.
That's right.
No. This was before the book. So as I mentioned to you, after Wizz Air, I went to study. I did a master's degree, and it's positive leadership and strategy. And one of the amazing tools that I learned there is called Appreciative Inquiry, which is basically a framework of a methodology that was developed in the 80s. To bring solutions to human-centric problems or challenges. So instead of asking all the why didn't it work, who's responsible, let's look at the strengths and weaknesses. It says, right, let's talk about the strengths and let's focus on what we love to do. Let's focus on what we'd like to be, what we inspire, what our strengths are, and that will take care of the weaknesses. It's not that it's ignoring, but let's kind of shine the light on what we can do. And this is what we did. And I used it in I did leadership and communications coaching for a few years. And I used this method a lot. And we used it at home. We sat down in the kitchen and said, right, what is it that we like to do? What are our talents? What is it that we do best as a couple?
Mm-hmm.
And where we want to be, and we look at all of that, and then we said, right, in order to do this, what are the resources that we need? What's the plan? And so it's not that everything that we learned in the corporate world is now cut off. A lot of things carry over.
Yeah.
And a lot of things we can use. I think the biggest kind of challenge is to be able to shift the mentality. The problem still that we're trying to overcome is our idea of we can only put out a perfect product onto the market. And this idea of perfectionism and this idea that you cannot fail, because if you fail, there's a lot at stake. That's the corporate mentality, because, working for an airline, you cannot do anything less than perfect, because people's lives
are too high. Yeah.
So, and here it's like, be prepared to fail quick, learn from it. It's so easy. It's not, it's a very different mentality. So our new mantra is progress over perfection. And we're trying to deal with that. But so we're combining the corporate kind of tools and the entrepreneurial spirit and mentality to kind of make a...
So it's a very conscious effort, because that's one thing that I'm really curious about. When you do come from a corporate background to then becoming an entrepreneur, like you say, is a massive mind shift. So what are the things that you've had to be very conscious about changing in your daily habits? I mean, do you still get up, shower, exercise, get dressed at your desk by 9 until 5 sort of thing? Or have you adapted your routine? How does that work now?
I mean, I think, you need to have a routine. And I think, again, as Natasha says, we have brought a lot of the discipline from the corporate world with us in that respect. I think the difficulty is that you're in the corporate world, unless you're at the very top, you're in a certain role. And so it's trying to get out of that mentality that you're responsible for a certain area and you have a very clear objective, and moving forward with that. With entrepreneurship is... it's this mass that you have to bring together and make sense of it. And I think that's been the challenge for us, is really getting out of this mentality that, the corporate mentality that everything kind of marches along lockstep with all the other pieces. You are all the other pieces.
That's what's one. But the routine is actually very similar, or even more strict, I would say. What we make sure is that we do what we preach, and we actually schedule our workouts, we schedule our meal times, we schedule our sleep. We're super good and disciplined in sleep. It doesn't mean that we don't stay up after 10 o'clock ever, but it does mean that 90% or even more, in our case, 95% of the times we are in bed by 9:30 and we are asleep at 10.
And then when you're working, you're super productive.
Yeah.
Because you have that boost of energy from having eaten correctly, having done your exercising, going for walks, walking meetings. So again, the message for people is, if they think, I don't have time for this, and it's not possible to make more time, but if you're using your time much more efficiently, then you can afford to prioritize your health and well-being, because it's driving that better performance.
I think it was Stephen Covey, wasn't it, that talked about sharpening the saw. I don't know if you're familiar with his seven habits of highly effective people. And I mean, that's a book that I read in my early 20s, and that's the number one thing that stuck with me. It's like, if I'm having a nap, that's not me being lazy. That's me ensuring that I'm so productive this afternoon.
Yes.
My husband still doesn't really quite get that. He still thinks I'm being lazy. One day he'll succumb to the power of the nap.
Napping.
Exactly.
Power naps.
And how do you decide who does what within the business?
I tell Jim what he does.
Excellent. That was the answer I was looking for.
No, but you know what? Jokes aside, I think we had to figure out this balance. I mean, I am, as a true Eastern European woman, I like to be in control. So for me, it was a shift to actually trust Jim. It's going to sound very, very silly at this stage, because he's a super successful corporate lawyer. So it's not like I doubted his capabilities, but when it comes to a family business, I was like, at the beginning, wasn't it the case, Jim, that I was like, I'll do it, or don't do it like this, do it like this, and just letting go. And again, letting go of the perfectionism. I think that a lot of, especially women in high positions in career, they kind of suffering from this. Everything has to be perfect, and unless it's the way I do it or it's the way I imagine it, then nothing else will do.
Mm-hmm.
No, progress over perfection. And I think we're slowly, and you are the same a little bit in this. I think that the thing that allows us to actually make progress is this, to let go. But I think we have different skill sets. Like,
for sure.
Jim is a lawyer, very attentive to details. I love that. Even when we paint, sometimes we do the painting of the same thing. You can immediately tell which painting is Jim's and which is mine, because Jim is, a lot of little details and the leaves and the length. And I have these big brush strokes, and I like to do this.
I like yours better.
Oh, that's so nice. Is that why it works? Because you do come at it from different angles with different skill sets.
Yeah, and we allow for that.
For sure. And I think writing the book was an excellent example, because it could have led to divorce, because it's like writing a book yourself is difficult, but writing with two people on an equal footing is very, very difficult. But I think it worked because of those differences, and we managed to kind of meld them together. And at one stage, our book coach said she couldn't tell who wrote which chapter. So that was how successful we became at being able to, if I wrote something, Natasha would tear it apart, and vice versa. And eventually we came to a style that I think, you having read the book, is compelling in that you have enough information, and I did all the footnotes, because that's
obviously.
I did all the graphics,
but so it works. And so the creative side and the kind of more analytic side, I think it works really well.
Is there anything that either of you miss about the corporate world?
I have one thing.
About it.
You go.
I think what I miss is, to be very honest, I don't think I would ever. I was a very good corporate manager. I don't think that would ever be the case anymore. But I think sometimes I miss the framework, that you have other people to lean on more, and there is a structure underneath you. I think being an entrepreneur, you have to work really hard to create some sort of structure around you. And, we're getting there. I mean, we are finding the right people who are not necessarily employed, but we're partnering with. So, but that kind of massive, like I remember when I was in Ukraine and I was running Wizz Air Ukraine, I never had to worry about the resources or expertise, because I knew that there was an army of people behind me who would support me in these areas. I think that's one thing. I think that makes sense. We're sort of at that stage in our journey where we're very small. We're still a startup, and so I think it's very much the two of us as co-founders. And you're starting to involve people from outside, and it's kind of letting go and being clear. This is their responsibility. We explain it, but you have to kind of let them do their thing. And then I think once we get to the stage where you're building teams together, I think that's when it becomes interesting again, where you have those personal interactions. I think that's the thing that I miss is, my team, building a team, despite what's going on in other areas, you are responsible for that team and making sure that they're functioning well. So I think that's something that, but I think you can achieve that from this kind of coaching aspect, where you go into companies and you help people to develop those skills as well. I think the truth is that the corporate world, like we grew up in, in the late 90s and early 2000s, is not anything that I miss. I think the corporate world is going through a massive shift right now, and really our kind of vision is to see a much healthier, much happier corporate environment. And it's not an easy journey.
We are seeing some quite positive moves in that direction, aren't we? I think we are definitely seeing very progressive companies that are making big steps towards ensuring the welfare of their staff is considered in a really healthy way.
That's true.
But there's so much work to be done yet.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Can you guys remember what your biggest fear was when you quit your jobs?
I think for me, it was letting go of that title, and having gone to school for so many years, it was like, how can you give that up? And the perception of other people, are people going to see this as a failure, that you went from this high-powered career and now what exactly are you doing? So I think that.
So can I stop you there for 1 second? Because this is very curious, because you're saying you're worried about other people thinking it was a failure rather than you thinking that this would be a failure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both, but we always sort of, well, at least me, you always kind of think what other people are going to say as well. We're social animals, and so you fit into society in a certain way. And I think that the joy for me is having broken out of that and saying, look, this is a passion for me to help other people. I've been through the pain, and I want to help other people avoid that. And it doesn't matter what you call me, it doesn't matter what I was doing before. This, for me, is a calling. But I have to say, it was difficult for me because, having grown up in Ireland, where there are three main professions, there's doctors, lawyers, and priests. And that was it. When you were one of those, you had made it to the pinnacle of your life. Maybe accountants were kind of second tier. But, so it was like, I was the first in my family to actually ascend that mighty ladder. And yeah, there is this kind of social pressure. But
whose perception were you most worried about? Your family, your colleagues, your friends?
Yeah, I think all of the above. Family, certainly. I mean, my mom and dad, but, they're very much, well, this is great. I mean, if this is what you're passionate about, this is what you want to do. So that really helped. But yeah, your friends, they see you, you've had this career, and then all of a sudden you've made this sudden shift. Like, what happened? Because you can't, I mean, unfortunately, your friends know a little bit about what's going on in your private life, but yeah, you tend to keep these things to yourself. And I think that's the problem as well. We internalize a lot of these problems.
Men do. My girlfriend knew everything.
Your girls knew everything. So it was probably quite jarring for people to say, whoa, what the hell happened there?
I think for Jim it was definitely true. I felt that he had a hard time letting go of the General Counsel title, and being the first lawyer in Ryanair, pretty much being there at the beginning of Etihad Airways as well, in the kind of golden times. For me, I think I didn't have time to think about the fears, because my career change really took a long time. So it was not like I was going towards something and then I decided to change. I abruptly ended one because of a life situation, and then I had years of trying to figure it out. But I think the constant fear is that, am I going to be, am I late? Am I going to be good enough to do this? And will people trust me in my new role?
When you say late, what do you mean? Late to the game?
Well, late in the game, when you change after 40 something, then it's, I mean, when I moved to the Middle East, I was age 39 or something like this. So, and I hope to have a job. And then, you get like, for years, you get this, we don't really know what to do with you. You don't really fit in here or there. So you have to start having doubts, and you realize that the ship has sailed. There are people who write much better press releases than you do. There are people who, do government affairs much better. They might have even a legal degree. You're not going to be a co-founder of an airline anymore, which gives you a certain kind of status. So what's next? And I think for somebody who didn't have a strong passion of, oh my God, there are people who know from childhood they want to do this, they want to bake bread, they want to open a restaurant or something else. I didn't have that. So for me, the fear was, whatever I'm going to do is like, am I late in the game? Like, what am I going to be? Just a mother? And I say it with all due respect to all the mothers out there who really find complete fulfillment in being mothers, and I really admire that, because that's a hard job. But I knew that for me, I needed to do something else, and there was a moment of panic there, that what is it going to be? And when we kind of organically grew into this health journey thing, it was like, oh wow, isn't this amazing? This is what it is. And then it becomes almost irrelevant because I'm doing it for myself, and whoever I can help, I'm happy with. So I don't think I have fears anymore as such.
They've shrunk over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And Jim, for you, I think particularly for men, women do feel pressure as well, obviously, but I think especially for men, they often feel like they have to be the provider, financially, emotionally. It seems to be part of a man's DNA often. How did you overcome that? Because you're stepping away from what I assume was a well-paid job into the unknown.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the other aspect of it is the fear of going from something that that's reliable, that keeps going up if you're able to survive, into wow, yeah, there's a lot of investment involved, and can we actually make this work and be able to feed the family?
That's still a question, though.
It's still a question.
No, but at least we're loving it and we're enjoying. We're pretty sure that we can make it work. But truth be told, we did manage our money really, really well. So we had investments, and we have investments. And I think this is one of the good and the bad things. But from one hand, you're not under pressure. You can do what you love and you can take your time. But the bad thing is that I think if I have one regret, is that we didn't start a more structural work sooner, because we're like, oh, well, we're not under pressure because we have a certain level of revenue that is, good enough for us. But I think it's almost better if you are under financial pressure to actually go out and make a dent in the universe, like Steve Jobs said. We didn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, so we're lucky in that sense that we don't have to be under a massive amount of stress. We can enjoy what we're doing, but eventually, a bit of stress is good as well. Yes. It pushes you out the door, and you don't need to be perfect. Just get out there. So that's the balance that we're still trying to find. Yeah. But I think for folks who are considering a change, it's important to recognize that, it certainly going from a corporate career to an entrepreneurial journey is challenging, and you need to be aware of that. The other thing I would say is that, and what we're trying to do for people by trying to catch this earlier on in their career, is that sometimes, and certainly was my case, is that you're making decisions in a panicked form. You're not being rational about your decisions. Whereas if you are able to be healthy within yourself, everything changes, and you may find that something that was a burden getting up on Monday morning for, when you change the mindset and you change your health, your perspective on health and well-being, actually this job is pretty good. There's so many positive things about this. Ooh. And you don't have to make those drastic decisions. Or you may find that now I know I need to make a change, but I'm doing it from a place of health. Yeah. And I can make rational decisions about my next step instead of panicking and the next job that comes along that looks like, it's roughly on my career ladder, go. Yeah. So I think that would be, kind of advice for people. Yeah.
And actually, I couldn't agree more with you that I think it's always a good idea to make decisions from a good place. And that's always the first thing that I try to work with my clients is, what are the good bits about where you are? Yeah. What are the things that are actually bringing you joy? And sometimes people, their sort of knee-jerk reaction is none of it. It's all rubbish. I hate it all. I hate my colleagues. I don't like where I work. I don't like what I'm doing. And actually, over time, that does shift. Yeah. And obviously I don't talk about the health and fitness to the level that you do at all, but we definitely talk about the mindset and looking for the positives in every situation. And that shift does occur, and it does make, people often go through my program and end up realizing, actually, I'm in a pretty good place. Yeah. Actually, I do quite like my colleagues, and actually the work that I'm doing is really meaningful to me. And I do enjoy standing up in front of people and doing my presentations, or whatever it might be that they find joy in, but they sort of just lost track of that along the way. So it's really fascinating. It's like it's the psychology of, it's what makes us human.
But isn't it's also the case that, in your case, I'm just listening to you thinking what you're also helping them do is to deal with their stress, and once the stress is lifted, suddenly the horizons broaden, and then they see much wider.
Yeah,
that's what, of course, this is the mental health part. And then when you start feeling the same in your physical body, that you don't have the aches and pains anymore, you don't have the nagging headaches, you don't feel completely exhausted physically, you suddenly have more space in your body, in your mind, and you see things that you didn't see before.
I couldn't agree more with you. And I think we sort of touched on it, or you guys touched on it briefly, is that I think, and I hate talking about men are like this, women are like that, but there are some obvious differences in that. I think men carry that burden on their own shoulders often, and they don't talk about it, and they put on the mask that you talked about, Jim, earlier, that people didn't realize that you were struggling because you didn't let anybody know. And I think generally speaking, women are much better at talking to people and sharing, and even not seeking advice as such, just talking about it and coming to their own conclusions, where I think men often find themselves quite lonely in this position where they feel they have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They can't even talk to their partners about it, and it's a lonely place to be.
It's a fascinating subject, and we're very passionate about it.
Well, your passion's coming through very, very clearly. I'd like to ask you both what your definition of success is.
I think success for me is really seeing the changes that people experience. I mean, for me, I don't know if it's success, but it's the satisfaction of, and then I feel like, I'm doing my job in this life. I'm helping people, real people, solving real problems. I think that's success for me. And also I quite like to feel authentic. So when I wake up in the morning and I'm happy, I'm looking forward to the day, and I love when I feel that I love where I am. This is success for me in life. I'm 50. I'm so grateful for being here with Jim and being in Harlem, having the sun that we have, having the life that we've got. This is for me all the success that I need, I think.
Wow. Okay. How do
no pressure, Jim.
I think for me as well, it's finally starting to feel comfortable in myself, not always being under pressure to be somebody else, to play the role. But also, as Natasha said, actually just the feedback from folks so far on the book, on what we've done in previous programs, that is just life-changing for people. And that to me is the pinnacle of success, where you've made that connection with people, and they're benefiting from it, and hopefully they can avoid some of the mistakes that we've made.
If you could see that snapshot of the last minute of our interview, if you could have seen that 10 years ago in a crystal ball, what do you think the Natasha and Jim of 10 years ago would have thought?
Well, okay, so that's an interesting one. For me, I'm thinking 2013, and the place I was so confused with what I'm supposed to be and who I'm supposed to be, and whether I will have a child or not, and whether, I can't find a job, and it's corporate, and I was trying to force myself into the same corporate roles and see. So I don't think I would see this at all. To this day, today, I'm like, how on earth did I end up in the health?
I think it'd be a shock.
And for you especially, my God.
To see that clearly would have been, oh my God, there is actually another way of doing this. Like, this is not the way life is supposed to be. Like, I can be living a fuller and happier life. So I think it'd be a huge kind of shock to the system, and hopefully would have changed the way I did things. And that's kind of what we're trying to provide for people, is to be that ability to travel back in time, for them to see us now and say, wow, you can actually do it all. You can balance everything and avoid, having these kind of health problems and having to deal with this insufferable amount of stress, it's absolutely achievable. Yeah. So I think for me, it would have been a wake-up call back then. I probably could have saved, years of my life by starting to take some of these actions back then.
Yeah. Amazing. Isn't it amazing how life throws things at us, and that's what makes it fun, isn't it? The unpredictability of it, where we'll end up. I realized that I asked you about your book earlier and you showed it to the camera, which is great for anybody watching on YouTube. But actually, if you're listening on audio only, would you mind just giving us a little spiel?
So the book title is Ready for Takeoff, a practical health guide for airline executives and their team to get back on top of their game. So a few things there. What a lot of people don't realize, and we're kind of putting this out on social media, is the takeoff is actually the acronym for the model that we've come up with. And it's based on the 4 drivers of health. So it's mindset, getting your mind ready first, and then nutrition, movement, and sleep. And it's taking small, consistent steps in each of those areas, because they all kind of interact with each other, that really starts to an upward spiral of positive health and well-being. And we wrote it specifically for our colleagues in the airline industry, because that's who we are. We resonate. Our stories are all about our careers in aviation. But obviously, these principles work for any human being. And the really cool thing is that the reaction that we're getting from outside the aviation industry is every bit as positive as our colleagues in aviation. So it's really heartening that we're able to spread that message more broadly than just aviation.
That is very cool. And the name of your company, which I will put everything in the show notes, but do you want to give your company a plug while we're here?
So the company is called Wellness Story, and the website is wellnessstory.world. It's WELLNESSTORY.world, and the website the book has been just published, so it's available on Amazon and in some other retailers, Barnes and Nobles.
Well, huge congratulations on the book. I really enjoyed. I haven't finished it, but what I've read so far, genuinely, I've just really, really enjoyed.
Thank you.
I hope it does really well. I hope your company takes off in the way that you envisage it.
Thank you.
And continues to fill you with this passion and joy that is so clearly coming across. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and I really hope people have enjoyed listening to this and will feel inspired by this story. Thank you so much for your time, both of you. I really, really appreciate it.
If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, do share it with them and subscribe now so you never miss an episode.